CEO Ron Insan. I hope we got it right, sir.
Right, yeah.
Here to help us make sense of it all, along with the Fitzgerald Group's Keith Fitz-Gerald. Welcome, gentlemen. Ron, you say a bad moon is rising with a reference, homage to Creedence Clearwater.
Yeah.
You
Hope
think
you got your things together. Hope you got your things
Hope
together.
you got your things together. Do you see this as a longish period of correction and adjustment, or
Not
something
sure
different?
Yet. I mean, right now we're just in the midst of a correction, believe it or not. I mean, we're not even down 10% on the major averages yet. The semis are, obviously. I think I'm going to mix a couple of metaphors here, including Creedence and the Olympics and a couple other things. But the Fed has not stuck the soft landing yet. And I think the important question of the Fed is what didn't they know and when didn't they know it, as a Watergate illusion. I think they're missing this.
In other words, what didn't they know that would have led them to cut rates just earlier this week?
Everything. Rates are down, stocks are correcting, earnings guidance has been abysmal for consumers in particular across corporate America. Energy prices in the midst of what may be a regional conflict in the Middle East are crashing across the board. Whether it's crude oil, whether it's gasoline, whether it's heating oil, whether it's natural gas, all of these are coming down amid concerns about the U.S. and Iran going to war potentially. It's not happening necessarily, but you know, all these messages.
So the question is, what the hell are you waiting for?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, they should have done it in July. I happen to think they should have done it earlier than that. Now everybody's putting the bet on a half-point cut.
But how do you react to that, Keith? Is it sort of a what are you waiting for here? And is the Fed at the risk of getting behind the curve, to use the cliche?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm all with Ron on this one. He makes some very insightful points. And, you know, to my own credence, I'm playing in a traveling band. I think the Fed has been wrong all along from the very get-go. So I'm not surprised to see this. But here's what gets my attention today is the psychology has changed. And that, to me, is significant. So I'm just going to take a look around. I actually did a little shopping today.
Let's talk about Intel, as I just saw its numbers. They're down 21% today. Keith, I think of Intel, and you know what I think of? I think of General Electric.
Oh, you know, it's very interesting you mentioned that, because we just had that discussion in our office this morning. You know, the company is struggling to remain relevant, which is unheard of for people who grew up in the generation I did, where that was a household name and could do no wrong. So, you know, to me, I think it's unfortunately
this company was
money.
Like General Electric, Ron, on the Mount Rushmore of companies.
1999, 2000, Intel was among the top 5 market caps in the world, all at $600 billion, including GE, Microsoft, Cisco Systems.
Can they get the mojo back?
I don't. Well, they're in a different business, right? I mean, they're
Keith
not.
says no.
Yeah, they're not competitive in the sense that an NVIDIA is competitive, or even an AMD, which they were, in fact, fighting with decades ago. There's been just a wholesale shift in what's important in the chip sector. And so I don't know. I mean, I know Jim Cramer and Carl and David Faber were talking this morning about some analysts using or questioning whether or not Intel could be a going concern. I think that is a bridge too far. But
it tells you how far we've come.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you start asking those kinds of questions,
well, it's not good.
It's not good.
Well, GE's completely broken apart, right?
Right.
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Keith, you mentioned you were going shopping today. If you want to kind of button this with any thoughts on Intel, or tell us what you are buying.
Well, Intel is one of these stocks that I'm going to stay away from now at all costs, pun absolutely intended. But I went after Apple today. I went after Microsoft. I added shares of Palantir. I'm going to look to some of those other names that have been hit hard, because opportunity is usually made on days like today. You just don't know it until the rearview mirror.
All right. So one of the questions, Keith, we've talked to you at great length about NVIDIA and your love for it and some of the big tech stocks over the last couple of years. Is this a moment of doubling down on them? And if you think they're great, at NVIDIA at 140, you must love it at 104.
Well, I have no problem buying it, but I'm playing to a longer-term perspective. I think, Ron makes a very important point. You've got to be very calm about this. We don't know exactly if the game's over, but we definitely know it's underway. So this comes down to tactics and psychology. If you're worried about what happens in the next 24 hours, then yeah, it's kind of a problem. But that's not my viewpoint. I'm looking at 3, 4, 5 years, especially on a pullback like this.
Ron, you look at what's happening, what seems to be happening with the consumer. You look at Procter & Gamble. You look at McDonald's. These are the ultimate consumer stocks.
Yeah, and they're flagging here, and they're saying, they're admitting it too, with their forward guidance, that this is a difficult, more cautious consumer. And it's not just those two. It's really across the entire spectrum of consumer companies who are saying that they're pulling back.
Well, now.
Almost.
So I'm glad you said this, because I'm scratching my head about this, frankly. Okay. Absolutely right about McDonald's. Absolutely right about you. What about Wingstop? What about Shake Shack? What about MasterCard not seeing any weakness in the consumer? Lifetime, we just talked a little bit on the higher end. It's a little bit different story. Yeah. But some of those places we would expect to see corroborating data points about a slowdown, I feel like I'm not getting them.
Probably segmented, you know, I mean, and so middle and lower income people are obviously feeling a pinch. Luxury, though, if you look at LVMH and, you know, across the pond is doing horribly.
Yeah,
right? So,
China, though, is a big part of that.
Yeah, and China, look, I don't think China's getting any better. And I think beyond what's happening domestically, I think all these markets, if you want to go to the message of the markets type thing, when you look across the entire spectrum of commodities, bonds, and stocks, you're getting global weakness or global recession worries, not just domestic.
Keith, final thought?
Well, if I may, you know, don't forget, Kelly, that a lot of those businesses that you just talked about are credit card driven. We know that spending can be shifted from cash to credit. So what we really don't know is if the spending's occurring or just debt simply piling up. The data seems to indicate that debt's piling up. So you got to stick with the quality names here.
Keith, do you have a favorite Creedence Clearwater song? Can you think of one?
Traveling Band, absolutely.
All right, Ron?
Favorite? Up Around the Bend, yeah.
Can we just say
Fortunate Son for me.
Which they play it all the time.
I don't care.
Awesome.
I love it.
because it's great.
It's good.
Well,
Yeah.
All right, guys.
I'm more of a Zeppelin guy anyway.
And what did they not play of Zeppelin? All right, Ron and Sana, Keith Fitz-Gerald, thanks.
Thank you.
Let's see if Rick Santelli sees trouble on the way. He joins us from Chicago with bond yields down sharply. Rick, Mohamed El-Arian was just tweeting.